Good afternoon and welcome to the April 11th or April 12th, 2023 Hillsborough County Commission Land Development Code Text Amendment Workshop. Before we get started, I want to read into the record from Commissioner Myers. Please ensure information regarding my absence is read into the minutes of the LDC workshop. I will not be available to attend the Wednesday, April 12th workshop due to another commitment. So that's from Commissioner Gwen Myers. And with that, and can the clerk have a roll call vote, please?
Yes, sir. Hagan?
Here.
Cameron Cepeda?
Here.
Cohen?
Here.
Kemp?
Here.
Owen? Wostel? Thank you.
Okay, I can't go on.
Oh, well,
Let them know I'm trying.
yeah, Commissioner Owen just let me know it won't let him log in, Chair.
Okay, if IT could please contact Commissioner Owen's office and work on having him connected, please. And with that, I believe Israel Monsanto will introduce the first item.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. I will share my screen so you can see the items. Let me know when we're ready. Commissioners, this is the workshop for the Land Development Code text amendments. Staff will conduct a public outreach meeting to share and receive input on these amendments with the general public on May 9th. The next board meeting pertaining to these text amendments will be the first public hearing on May 18th. Then this will be at the Planning Commission meeting on June 12th for consistency findings. And then on the second and last board public hearing will be on June 15th. The three items that we will be sharing today with you, Commissioners, is there are three items: LDC 230138, vaping retail shop standards; LDC 230311, comprehensive plan amendments and related rezoning applications; and LDC 23312, yard waste, air curtain incinerators. The first item, vaping retail shop standards. The purpose is to add development standards to the location and permitting of the establishments that sells vaping products within 500 feet of public or private elementary, middle, and secondary schools. This will require a conditional use zoning permit to be approved for the establishments within 500 feet of public or private schools. Vaping retail shops within 500 feet of a school will be a permissible conditional use in the commercial neighborhood, commercial general, commercial intensive, and manufacturing districts, and also planned developments which permits uses allowed in the zoning mentioned above. It will prohibit retail shops with more than 20% of its total monthly retail sales vaping products within 500 feet of public or private schools, and vaping retail shop with more than 20%, prohibit vaping retail shops with more than 20% of its total monthly retail sales of vaping products located within 500 feet of public or private schools that were a permitted use and in lawful operation by the effective date of this amendment would be deemed a legal nonconforming use. This nonconforming use determination will need to be made through submittal of a determination of nonconformity application by the property owner or operator. The determination will identify the maximum percentage of total monthly retail sales that may be derived from the sale of vaping products, and the permitted sales percentage will not be eligible for increase or expansions by the Board of County Commissioners. This text amendment also provides for definitions of vaping retail shop, vaping product, and vapor generating electronic devices. And this will update the section of the code 120100. And new conditional use sections as a result of this amendment will be added, 611.136, with these new standards. Also, section 110301 will be amended for the non-conforming use requirements. And lastly, the table of allowable uses will be updated, adding the proposed use permitted as a conditional use in the districts that we mentioned above. And that concludes this first text amendment presentation.
All right, thank you. Do we have any board member questions or comments? Commissioner Owen.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank staff for all their hard work on this, and
working so closely with me on this, and as well as all you commissioners for getting behind this. So mine was just a quick comment, but great work on this, staff, on all your preparation and hard work. So that's all I have.
Okay, great. Appreciate your championing this, Commissioner Owen. Next item, Israel.
Thank you. Next item. Text Amendment 230311, Comprehensive Plan Amendments and related rezoning applications. The purpose of this text amendment is to modify the procedures of amendments to official zoning atlas or rezonings of the Land Development Code, specifically the consideration and final decisions by the board when rezonings or major modification applications are related to applications for amendments of the future of Hillsborough County Comprehensive Plan. This text amendment will establish that applications proceedings in accordance with the Land Development Code, Part 10.0300, that are contingent on a request to amend the future of Hillsborough Comprehensive Plan for unincorporated Hillsborough County will be deemed withdrawn and no further effect in the event that such requested amendment to the future of Hillsborough Comprehensive Plan for unincorporated Hillsborough County is denied by the Board of County Commissioners and no further proceedings or action will be required. This text amendment will update sections 10.0304 of the Land Development Code with the proposed language. And that concludes this item presentation.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments from board members? If not, go to our third item.
Thank you. The third and last item is text amendment 230312, yard waste, air curtain incinerators. The purpose of this amendment is to modify the standards for yard waste, air curtain incinerators, or ACI facilities. The amendment will distinguish between commercial facilities which accept yard trash generated off-site for incineration and those that are temporary and accessory to the clearing of land, limited to the incineration of yard trash generated on-site only. This amendment will specify that the commercial facilities will only be permissible as a conditional use in the commercial intensive and manufacturing zoning districts. Also, the facility will be limited to the incineration of yard trash only, and open pile burning will be prohibited. Facilities that are accessory to land clearing for site development will be permitted in all zoning districts as a conditional use. It will also provide for a minimum required setbacks along boundaries and roadways, increased yards from residential development or zoning districts, and also restrict the duration of the use for the accessory or temporary ACI sites and require a screening by a solid fence around these uses. Both types of facilities will require to meet all federal, local, and state of Florida environmental requirements and permitting. Section 611-103 of the Land Development Code pertaining to these regulations will be replaced, adding the proposed standard for both commercial and accessory air curtain incinerators. And the table of allowable uses will indicate that these facilities will be permitted as a conditional use on all zoning districts. And that concludes this presentation of the item.
All right, Commissioner Kemp.
Yes, I'm glad that this is coming up. I'm sure you are too, Commissioner Hagan, because we did ask for this when we had, were taken by surprise by the arrival of one of these, and that they were just permitted on agricultural land, which we didn't know to a great intensity, which was not temporary but permanent, and to accept other yard waste. So this is very important. I just have a couple questions. So if you, so it's only going to be, just to be clear, I guess, it will only now be permitted on a permanent basis to take waste from other places if it is in commercial intensive and or manufacturing. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that's correct.
Okay, and then next, even in those places, it will require, is this true? So somebody acquires a manufacturing district or commercial intensive, and we, you know, with just the standard uses, I don't even know how many of those are. But then if they want to put in one of these incineration facilities on a permanent basis, like the one that was described to us where they take waste from other areas, then they are in addition required to get a conditional use permit?
Yes, well, they are, yes, they're subject to a conditional use permit that will have the separation requirements that are listed here in the code. And that permit would be, what we typically do, conditional use permits is they are done in conjunction with a site development review. So the conditional use permit provides some extra criteria that need to be met as part of the site review, and that would be the conditional use permit. Yes, ma'am.
So I'm just concerned. Let's say that the person, they, you know, in that particular site, I think they would have had a lot of pushback if they had tried to make it commercial intensive or manufacturing, and that would have given us a little bit of heads up about how the property would have been used. And I think that neighborhood would have been opposed to it. But does this mean, like, what I'm trying to get at is there could just be some other places pretty close to residents and everything else where we could approve a commercial intensive or a manufacturing site without quite a heads up to this, because these sounded like they had terrible toxic impacts. In fact, I thought we had stated that we didn't want to allow them, except on a temporary basis, to do yard waste as described. I don't know. Can you kind of sort that out for me a little?
Yes, Commissioner. So just first of all, the permanent facilities would also be limited to yard waste. So it doesn't allow for the incineration of any other materials other than yard waste. In terms of the manufacturing and commercial intensive zoning districts, those are pretty high intensity zoning districts, and they do get a lot of scrutiny as to compatibility with the surrounding areas. They also can only be considered in the more intensive future land use categories. So there's another layer, so that the location that had been previously discussed, or previously at issue, was not an area that I would go out and say we would ever support manufacturing or commercial intensive in that area because of the nature of the surrounding uses and the nature of the area. So we certainly take whatever feedback the board would have, but those zoning districts are, we identified those zoning districts as they're conditional uses now, and they are allowed in those districts now, and they are, again, the more intensive zoning districts where you might see heavy commercial activity or manufacturing or industrial activities. So that was the rationale for keeping them there. But again, it is limited to yard waste. So there's no other materials that could be burned in those facilities.
Was the proposed incineration facility before limited to yard waste?
I believe that it was, yes.
Because it sounded like it had, I mean, I know we think of yard waste as being a safer thing to burn, but it sounded like it had really tremendous impacts, in terms of the environmental effects, air and other toxicity at and around the plant. So, and one of the things I was concerned about is, like, I'm thinking, if this is what we need to do when we have waste that is generated within our county, that's one thing. I hate to be a repository for getting things from outside of our county, is another question I have. Importing, waste that then adds to toxic environment here.
Yes, I understand that. One thing I'll note in terms of the emissions, we do have to. We've got a little bit of feedback from EPC, and we're going to tweak some of the description of the definitions in subsection A2. but there are thresholds built into this where if they reach a certain amount of emissions per year, then they're only allowed in the heavy industrial future land use categories, which is a much more limited subset of land area. So there's heavy industrial, there's light industrial. So if they do trigger any of those emission standards, then their locations would be further restricted to those heavy industrial future land use categories, which are generally around the port area.
Okay, and one other, when it's conditional use, so, and that comes to us in these districts, the commercial intensive or the manufacturing, when it comes to us as a future land use, so is that something we approve as a condition at that time? Does that go to a special hearing master? It's out of our hands. How does that work?
So a conditional use review is an administrative process, and a conditional use it gets reviewed as part of the development of the site, and it gets reviewed for compliance with the conditions that are set out in the land development code. So in this case, they would be reviewed for the emissions thresholds that are in subsection A2, and reviewed for the meeting the site requirements that are in subsection C. It's not a process that it comes to the board. However, any designation, any zoning, of course, to a CI or M comes to the board, and any designation of land as light industrial, heavy industrial, any change to those districts would come to the board in the form of a comprehensive plan amendment, a map change.
Understood. But somebody could have like initially a CI or an M zoning district, and there could be a board in the future that, just like us, was taken unawares on what exactly the impacts and the effects of this are. And so we could approve just generally the district that would include this, and that area could be developed around whatever. They could come and just go to a hearing master or administratively get this use approved, and the board wouldn't have any say in it under this. Is that correct? I mean, I just wouldn't, we're very aware of it right now, but I could see it sinking into because we were all just shocked, by this.
Right. The way you've described it is correct in the way that it is structured. And so if the board was looking for options of looking at these individually on a project or site by site basis, one option would be to require that they only be approved as part of a planned development zoning, which would then necessitate board approval or future board approval if it were to be structured that way.
I'll just say, for me, I would want to avoid this ever happening again in this way. And I could see this happening again under this kind of structure in this way, or a board who didn't go through the shock of this. And like I said, I don't know if there's other uses lurking out there. I don't know that any of us had ever heard of an incineration curtain. So I'll just say that's a concern for me as we move forward. And I'd like to know that a future board wouldn't get surprised and just not have no recourse.
And board members, well, first of all, I want to thank Commissioner Kemp for her comments. I share her concerns on the potential on future board potentially being faced with this situation again. And candidly, it was a nightmare situation that was in my district in a neighborhood. And not only was it a nightmare situation, it was a very unique situation in that it was one where it was a state initiated permit request facilitated by the EPC that we sit as board members, yet did not come under our purview. So I've never seen a situation like this. It was nightmares is the only way to really characterize it. So anything that we can do to avoid this happening in the future, and to candidly just to take that additional steps to protect our neighborhoods, I'm certainly in favor of. I guess the question I have, Adam, regarding your suggestion on the required to have a PD zoning, is that something that we could consider at the next discussion of this, or how would that be implemented if the board wanted to go that route?
Commissioner, for what we could do is we could bring back that as another option for the board to consider. So we could have this structure. We could also prepare language that would only permit them as a specifically approved use within a planned development.
I would respectfully request that you do that. That'll give us more time to read it, study it, see if there are any unintended consequences of doing that. But I think having that option would definitely be beneficial for us at least to consider. At a minimum, I think what we have in front of us is a very good start, but potentially we could strengthen it. But don't want to just jump into something without looking at it and studying it. But if you could just prepare that as an option and give us time to go over it and study, I think that'd be well received.
Yes, sir. We will do that, and we will include that option in what we present in our outreach meeting, so that it does get some public, so that language is vetted or has some public exposure.
Okay, and I do appreciate all staff's work on this very much so. Any other questions or comments, Commissioner Kemp?
Yeah, I'm just wondering too about I know you outlined the PD, I get that, but I'm wondering, it seems to me like we took back, which I was surprised that the county never had specific jurisdiction, like kind of over the borough pits that, that was administrative. And I'm just wondering about special use permits or something that specifically come to the board just for permitting certain things like this.
So, Commissioner, the land excavation process was a special use, and so what was changed was that special use would come to the board rather than being decided by a LUHO. I would suggest that structurally, having it come to the board as a special use or having it come to a planned development, we can get to the same place where the specific use and the details of it would need to be presented and considered and specifically approved by the board as part of the planned development zoning. And we can have minimum criteria in the code and provide clarity that those are minimum thresholds, but any specifically approved permanent use that's going to take from other sites may be subject to additional requirements based on its location.
Thank you. I just want to do everything we can to get to that end.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thanks, Adam. Any other questions, comments, board members? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.